I mean, we have a horrifically unsuccessful rate of dieting in the world, like globally. There's like it's less than 5% that people are able to actually keep weight off if they're overweight or obese.
Yeah.
So there's some huge missing pieces here. Eating disorders.
Yeah.
Or more along the lines of disordered eating.
Yep.
And it's super common within the coaching realm, like people who are involved in being nutritionists and registered dietitians, and
It's
it's
super,
insane.
yeah. You know what's super interesting is honestly hearing you bring that up because it's something that I actually notice in myself. And I have friends who clearly have disordered eating, you know, like we joke about it, but like I was working, I'm not going to name names, but I was working in the nutrition school and I had a friend who would literally like put her garbage in my garbage can so that it looked like it was not her eating it. And like she would hide
Oh,
it in her
wow.
desk so like students wouldn't walk by and see that, you know, like today we ate A&W, you know, like
Mhm.
because we were so forefront in the administration area, we were all so nervous to actually show people what we ate because we had 60 students coming in a day watching us, right? And we're all nutritionists. So what does that say?
Absolutely. That's
Yeah.
exactly it. I mean, it's a weird thing initially to go through when you're doing it, to sort of have that like vulnerability to actually be open with what you're eating, and the fact that you still indulge like a human.
I
And
ate an ice cream bar right before I got on this call with you. Like, you know, like here's the reality of it, right? Like
yes,
you're going to get stressed out. You're going to stress eat, but the trick is to actually like notice when you're doing it. You know, like are you doing it because you're stress eating or are you doing it because you're actually enjoying, you know, that moment of like gratification? Like, hey, I get to have an ice cream bar and this is nice. And you have no guilt attached to it. And you can just have the ice cream bar and not be like, oh man, I'm totally going to like break out tomorrow. Yeah.
absolutely. And it's the thoughts and feelings that follow too, like people who, that's the crazy piece of all this, like when you get into nutrition coaching, or you know, helping anybody with eating and so forth, the uniqueness of every individual, and the fact that in some cases you should be encouraging, like you're encouraging the person to have an ice cream bar
Yeah.
and go through the process of, okay, then you have to be aware of what follows. Do you feel like a piece of shit? Do you talk smack about yourself? Are you, it's just a fascinating thing. And on the other end of the spectrum, yeah, you can of course have people who, like you said, they're unaware of the fact that they're not eating the ice cream bar for pleasure
Mm.
and moderate indulging. It's like it's basically an escape. It's a numbing. It's a total stress related response. And you know, obviously if you do it too much, then it can be detrimental. So they would maybe need to go through an entirely different process to figure out or to get to that level of awareness. It's a fascinating thing.
Yeah, it's a lot of psychology. And I don't think a lot of people realize how much psychology and mindset plays a role as being a really good nutrition coach, because it does take that level of awareness. And I always say, like, if you don't have that awareness in yourself, how are you ever going to be a good nutrition coach, right? Like, if you can't see the behavior that you're using as coping mechanisms, like you said, or numbing mechanisms, whatever it is, like how are you going to know and recognize those in your clients? So like I've been watching you on Facebook, which is obviously like the evolution of like what our conversations have started out from excuse me, like 5 years ago. and all of those things. It's really interesting to see you, how you're catching onto the mindset piece. So I'll say early on, but starting out as a practitioner. And I want to ask you, do you think that actually like relates back to you being able to connect with your body through your sport? I'm just curious.
Yeah, I wouldn't say through my sport, but definitely having been through the process of identifying, wow, I actually have a certain level of disordered eating.
Mm.
I would eat incredibly fast. I had, in a lot of cases, was, although very fortunate to be an athletic guy and into fitness and health, so I for the most part maintained a relatively healthy, lean body, but the what was going on inside of this was not healthy at all.
Right.
It was over restriction followed by binging, and the psychological warfare that followed. It was this like cyclical, on a weekly basis
Mm-hmm.
process. And all the things that I had learned and gathered in my studies was, yeah, I mean, you're right, you cannot teach that unless you learn it yourself and go through it yourself. And so, having been through that and sort of seeing the light and going, wow. And you're right, I mean, I'm still very early into this, and it was like a difficult process when I started bringing clients on, as I'm sure you experienced early on as well. You're like, wow, this is just so much beyond telling people what to remove and what to add
Yeah,
and how to
because
move and so forth.
going back to like the conversations that I remember having you, and they were few and far between because I feel like Sean always stole my thunder, even though we were talking about nutrition mixed with like sport, mixed with personal training and all of those things. But I feel like the conversations that we used to have about nutrition were about what to add in and what to remove, right? It was never about
Mm-hmm.
anything like, we talked about the microbiome. I remember a conversation, about that with you. I can't remember any of the other topics, but I remember that one specifically. And I feel like since then, I've discovered the same thing about nutrition and mindset around coaching other nutritionists for me, and coaching anybody through anything really is all about mindset. And so, do you, that's why I said, I guess early on you caught on to the mindset piece. So I don't want to be like, you're a new nutritionist, no. But like, I've been in this game for a lot longer than you have, and I feel like I'm just figuring it out. So what was the ultimate like trigger for you, do you think, that, and what do you boil the mindset piece down to? Those are big
Great
questions.
question. No, it's great. I would think, for one, I feel very fortunate that I laid my educational foundation with precision nutrition. To
Mm.
be honest, like I've since branched out in a big way, and they advise you to do that. But I just think that they got me rolling along that path of understanding that it is way more about psychology than it is about actual nutritional science.
Mm-hmm.
And then the second most impactful phase was failing with clients, like
Mm.
going through it. And that was the toughest part for me. And I kind of knew it early on because, and it's something I would love to even chat with this about you or with you. It's like, what's missing within this realm that we're in. And I say we, I know that you've gone a different path, and perhaps there's gaps to be filled within that from my sort of avenue of where I've arrived. But knowing that you kind of have to just like jump in once you're, sufficiently certified, of course, and ready to do this, there is a certain level of, okay, you have to essentially work out some kinks with real people.
Yeah.
And that was tough for me. Like it was really difficult because in so many other industries, if you're if you're looking to improve, you know, there's just maybe a less crazy way to go about it, like where you don't
Mm.
have to use actual subjects. And so that's a long way of answering your question. Like when I started bringing on clients and tried to impose is a bad word, but it's the learnings that I gathered and realized like, wow, this is not working. And and you cannot just like try and help people how to eat more lean protein or
No.
vegetables,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah, like that
Like
doesn't
there's so
work.
much more going on. No.
Well,
And so it
okay.
was just like exploring all the other stuff that I had to do outside of that to make it work.
Yeah, and I wrote some notes, and I just want to stop you there and kind of respond before I lose my brilliance in my response to you. And it's, I say brilliance, who knows? It could be really boring, but
Can't
um,
can't wait.
yes. Imagine, okay, so imagine, like I'll use myself as an example, right? Like when I started Prepped with Love, the reason that I started with Prepped with Love was, which is my meal planning company, just in case people
Yeah.
don't know, right? Um, when I started that, essentially, I started it because nobody was following my plans. I failed with like, I mean, I had some successful people, right? Like the ones that I kind of coached in a certain way were really successful. And so I kind of actually switched from a consulting method like I had been taught in school, which was very like clinical and reductionistic almost, and I could kind of
Mm.
feel was going to be actually creating more problems than anything, because it's like having you look so deeply into the issue, which is necessary when you are in a clinical setting. But when you're working in a fitness industry like I was, it's usually just something very simple. And so I switched to the coaching method, and that's kind of when I saw like people actually getting change, that's really great in English, but you know, seeing improvements in their health was based on these little tidbits of information and not so much a huge plan that they had to follow over a long-term period. It was really working on behavior change. And then I kind of still felt like people weren't getting it and weren't going through it. So Prep with Love was my way of just kind of simplifying it all for them and having them just eat the healthy meals I prepped.
Mm.
But at the same time, once I'm out of the picture, then what? You know, then what?
Mm.
Are they going to know how to do those things? And I do have one client, but she literally sat with me the majority of the time and watched me cook and kept all my recipes and all of those things. And I was coaching her while I was cooking. And so
Mm.
I kind of feel like it boils down to knowing your values, like, and knowing who you are and knowing what your issues are around food and being able to really witness what's happening with another person. And as a coach, I think what's missing is that kind of intuition and connection with a person. You know, instead of looking at supplements and looking at, you know, macros and all of those things, we need to be looking at the person. What's their life like? Are they doing
Mm.
self-care routines? You know, because eating well is really a form of self-care, right? So
Absolutely.
if you care enough about your body, you're going to eat well. And so that's kind of what's happened with me in my journey too, right? With myself and my coaching. And I think that could be what is potentially missing with a lot of people. I don't know.
100%. Question for you, Lynn. So when you say that when you made that transition from more clinical to coaching,
Mm-hmm.
if you could summarize like what is the big gap there?
Yeah. So I guess when I say that, like, I mean, and I was actually going to write down here, like, did you have to do case studies when you were doing your precision nutrition? Like, did you have to do any kind of work and then send it in and get kind of marked on it, or no?
Mm-hmm. We did, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, were those like examples given to you that you just worked off, or did you have to find a real human to work with?
It's been a mix. and I'm kind of still in the process. Like I said, I'm doing my level 2 currently,
Mm-hmm.
and that's been I mean, in the level 1 there was plenty of case studies in there, but you wouldn't have to submit them. Level 2
Okay.
is more of a intensive year-long everyday type thing where you're held accountable with a coach and so forth. So um, there's been case studies ranging from, yeah, like given a general framework of a person who's clearly suffering from orthorexia, let's say, and you have to sort of, they'll give you a few scientific articles to read that are relevant to the case, and and then fill in any blanks and do a write up on it, or find some creative way of basically showing them that you understand what's going on and how you would take, what kind of action steps you would take to help resolve the issue. So
Mm.
that's been a big eye opener, and I think maybe that's what you're helping me answer my own question here, because that's kind of more on the clinical side of you know, diving into the research and figuring out things from that side of things. But I'm just curious, like even just from, because there's such a variance of ways to go about this, like to
Mm-hmm.
arrive at a place where you can help someone with their nutrition, and hopefully it's still kind of the wild west too, like,
Exactly. And that's the
you know.
brilliance in it. Honestly, that is the brilliance in this field. So I'll answer your question now that I know what your case studies kind of look like. So it really depends. What's interesting in this field and what's fun for me to look at, um, coming from our background. So I went to Canadian School of Natural Nutrition, and our case studies there are kind of set up to be more in line with how you would work alongside a naturopathic doctor, right? So like
Mm,
you get somebody coming in with an autoimmune condition or gut issues or migraines, whatever it is that you're working on. And your job, like in these case studies, is to essentially break down the overview. Like, are you looking at the whole human? Like, what's their life like? What's their eating habits? What is their job like? Are they stressed out? And then you have to look at the assessments that we do. So we actually have like um, a numerical assessment, you know, that tells us kind of what body systems are in or out of alignment based on their
mhm,
symptoms and severity. And then from there, you kind of have to deduct, well, what's truly at the root of this issue? And for me, when I was marking case studies as an instructor, I literally would deduct marks or tell them that they were wrong if they didn't start with the gut, to be fair.
mhm,
So that's kind of where I mean, and then our recommendations would fall in line of, you know, body, mind, spirit. So like de-stressing, making sure that you're eating on a regular schedule, taking supplementation, what else, you know, and if we thought that they should be seeing a naturopathic doctor, we would have to recommend out. So there was like things that we had to make sure that they understood and knew, and they had to refer out when they needed to. um, so that's kind of what I mean by more clinical, in the sense that you're looking at every little piece of the person and making
mhm,
sure that there's research behind it, making sure that it's scientifically based, and then pulling in from like the herbal world and Eastern medicine and that kind of thing. So
mhm,
it is a really fascinating way of approaching it. However, for a student coming out of CSNN, if they're not going to go work with a naturopathic doctor, they're not going to be able to hand that 5-page report that they've created so seamlessly to their client and have their client comply. You know, like,
mhm,
what's going to happen? Probably nothing. They might take their
mhm,
supplements, but the reality is that the way we've been brought up, especially people who are older than us, it's almost like a reductionistic approach, you know, like, can I just take a pill? Can I just change my protein? You know, like, and you know this, right? Like, you're smiling for a reason, right? Like, you want the quick fix. And so I
mhm.
think if we have to say, like, how do we fix the Wild West? And I don't know, maybe you agree with this, is like trying to X the reductionistic approach and actually starting to remember how to feel and remember how to focus on ourselves and put ourselves first, and, you know, really optimize your self-care, and your client's self-care, and teaching them how to do that.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It has to be. It's the only way. Because I mean, yeah, you're exactly right. It's such a, it's just, it doesn't work. People like 90, there's a very small, from in my experience anyways, there's just a very small percentage of people who take those orders and just execute,
Hmm.
because there's always like that thing. It's Krista Scott Dixon, who's kind of one of the head of content creation and education at PN. She says like you have to help them discover the thing before the thing, and
Hmm.
sometimes that's the most simple. It's like, even if it's okay, you've landed on, even in a clinical sort of mindset where you're like, this client needs to up their protein intake, let's say, as an easy example. How do you do that?
Yeah.
Like, how do you get them to do that? That's the
Yeah.
thing. You're like, you can't just say it.
You
You
can't
can't
force it down
just,
their throat,
no.
like.
And in most cases, they'll say, yeah, sure. Okay, great. That's easy. And then you have to hold them accountable and be like, okay, okay, awesome. Right on. How are you going to do that? What do you mean? I'm just going to eat more. Okay. Tell me what's that going to look like? Okay, I like chicken. I'm gonna eat more chicken. Okay,
And
when are you gonna,
broccoli.
yeah, it's just like you, it's such a, there's just so much more to it. And so that's interesting to hear about your process and having not only gone through that education yourself, but then worked and there and graded those case studies for other students coming through, and now being able to reflect on that and think like, what's missing? Truth be told, there's so much to know. It's endlessly dense in terms of the nutritional realm. So you can study forever for the next 60 years and not learn everything that there is to learn with that more reductionistic clinical style of education. But then there's that whole other piece of it. It's like the psychology, the behavioral psychology, and what sparked maybe more of this conversation of like fixing the thing before the thing, fixing
Hmm.
the mindset to allow for people to know, not only know how, but be willing to make these changes and actually make them last, like
Yeah.
have them stick. So they're not just doing these diets that, I mean, we have a horrifically unsuccessful rate of dieting in the
Yeah.
world, like globally. There's like it's less than 5% that people are able to actually keep weight off if they're overweight or obese.
Yeah.
So there's some huge missing pieces here, and it's like, that's another crazy piece of it that I won't get sidetracked on, but you see within this wild west that we've tagged it, like there's people who get into it, bless their hearts, I give them the benefit of the doubt. They want to do good, just like you and I do, and just like I did in the beginning, and was like not helping clients.
Mm.
Like I was not helping clients get there sustainably and in a good way, even though I really wanted to. But you know, coaches are motivated by these transformations, these physical aesthetic transformations. So we're really incentivized to like just be super accountable, coach hard ass, and like, come on, you can do it. Let's go. Like, it's only 3 months, this program, because I want that final, transformation pick. And I
Yeah.
don't care. I'm not really thinking about what's this going to do to this person in 5 years.
Yeah.
And the research on that is very clear. They're going to regain it, and probably more. They're going to be in a worse place than when they started with me if I am to take that approach. So that's a whole other thing where as a
So
coach, you have to like,
I have to interject. Sorry, I know you're
yes.
on this thing, but I know why that is. Do you know the scientific reason as to why that is?
Why they regain?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the defense mechanism. Like the body will make it, not only it'll do all that it can to stop further weight loss. It'll then make it, once you start eating in more of a surplus, it'll make it more efficient at regaining and storing that weight.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's going to also have like a third prong of that defense mechanism that's going to make future weight loss even more difficult.
Yeah, and the hormonal aspect of it. But what I learned actually in a training that I took recently through Metabolic Balance, and they work on actually rebalancing the metabolism of somebody. So rebalancing like on a very cellular level of how to, you know, biologically help somebody get out of obesity and back into like a healthy weight. And what they teach is that it's the protein breakdown. So while you're losing the weight, if you're not consuming enough protein and your body's breaking it down, cannibalizing its protein sources, as you start to consume, until you actually refill those protein stores, you're going to eat 1.5 times roughly the amount of calories that you would have before. So it's like the overeating, like then you start overeating. So that's where you get the yo-yo dieting from, is because the body's physically causing you to crave these things to eat more because you've been in starvation mode. And so it's like just reiterating that cycle of most likely behavioral eating, right? Like, and then feeling shitty about it because you're like, why can't I stop eating? I'm so hungry, you know, like, and then you feel like an asshole because you've just like lost all this weight and you're gaining it all back, and then you fuck your brain up. And that's my technical term for it, is that you just become like literally fucked up when you think about the way that you eat.
100%. I mean, that's a perfect way of meshing those two together, because when you're not aware of that, so having that more clinical, like scientific understanding of what's happening,
Yeah,
can be really relieving to clients, because the worst piece of it is that self-talk that follows, right? It is that like, why am I such an ass? Why am I the only person that struggles with this? They feel isolated and like they're just a loser and they have zero willpower, when really there's so much more at play. Like you said, the hormones, their ghrelin and leptins all mangled, and they're just like, their body's fighting tooth and nail to get them back to that weight that it's found sort of a homeostasis at, because they've been there for so many years.
yeah.
And so, yeah, it's a very complex process, right?
Well, and I wrote my little notes here, and I think that when we have to look at this subject, we have to really define what health means to us. Like, you know, like what does health actually mean? Does health mean that you're skinny and you're as the like you look like that perfect person on Instagram, or is health a different definition for you? And I think that honestly was one of my biggest shifts, is like, you know, where am I at like right now? Like obviously for me, health is huge because of my fibro, right? Like I have to stay on top of my shit or else my fibro flares. So it's like, what's my definition of health? My definition of health is to feel like I'm not in a flare. And the only way that I know I can stay out of a flare is by having a routine, making it a non-negotiable. And I'm not talking about the routines that we typically see as like health coaches, like I must eat this amount of food and I can only eat this and I have to do this, like restriction or anything like that. It's really connecting with myself again, like taking the time to have space, taking the time to sit down and really like feel what I'm feeling in my body. It's like that itch that you have, you know, like the longer that you leave it, the more itchy it's going to get. Whereas if you just take care of it right away, it's going to get better. So it's like, if you give yourself that space and that time to like actually sit and be with yourself and start to learn how to feel again, you start to realize that a lot of the issues that you're causing or that are happening are being caused by you. It's, you're not taking the time for yourself. You know, like it's more the excuses and the psychology behind it. Like, I'm sure you heard, I don't have time, right? Like how often, right? I don't have time for that. What's another excuse that you hear all the time? Because it's probably the same ones everybody does. You know, like,
Yeah.
I don't have time. My kids are too busy. I'm always on the run. I work 9 to 5. I work an 18-hour job. Who put yourself in that position, you know, to not take care of yourself? Like, it's really just the body screaming back at you going, hey, fuckhead, wake up. Like, dude, what are you doing to yourself? Like, and
Yeah.
I think it does come back down to like the body, mind, spirit kind of aspect, and recognizing like you are you and you got to take care of it, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah, it has to be that realization. That's, and again, I mean, there's situations with clients where, and I'm sure you've experienced this, where you're like, yeah, wow, you know, you do have a load of challenges in front of you, but like, what do you want? What do you ultimately want? And that's again why, you know, I've, the mindset piece that got kind of us sparked on this chat, it has to be, for me in my process, front loaded. It's like we don't even talk about nutrition or movement or anything
Mm-hmm.
until, or sleep or any of that shit, until like we've established a clear set of, you know, where you want to get to, like what do you want and why do you want to get there, how does it connect with your true values and your priorities and your identity, and what limiting sort of thought processes and so forth how do you think have been holding you back? Like, people have to put in that hard work. It's like the person that reads all the self-help books but doesn't do any of the exercises. Like, you have to do those chapter ending exercises, because thinking through those things and writing things down and gaining that clarity is everything. It's what helps pull you through the shit when it gets hard.
Yeah. It's funny that, you know, I so I'm teaching like my mentorship program tonight, and this is literally what we're talking about, is like the mindset piece of it. And it's like I said, you have to make that definition of what health looks like to you. And then you need to define your goals, and you need to know why you're doing them and how you're going to get there. Because like, you know, how do you know that you're actually achieving what you want to do if you haven't gotten there? And so I've kind of felt like my position as a nutrition consultant has actually moved more into being more like a life coach, and
Mhm.
you know, figuring out what's holding a person back, what their limiting beliefs are, what the stories are that they've been telling themselves that are literally like keeping them stuck. And oh my god, I've said this word so many times in the last like 2 days, literally keeping them stuck in that position, right? And yeah, I don't know if you feel like you're more of a life coach now than like, you know, nutrition does have to play a role, but you know, in school we are taught the body, mind, spirit aspect. And I don't know if PN does that as well, but I regret not taking that more seriously when I was learning about it, because I think that has really fueled me in understanding how to be a better coach.
Yeah, 100%. I think I'd love to hear your experience with it, because it sounds like you did have an all-encompassing sort of education with it, mind, body, spirit. It has to be that way. PN very much does that as well.
Mhm.
But I don't think you realize it. Like, for me, from my own bias, you get excited about the nutritional science. You get excited about learning things that you can tinker on yourself with nutritionally and whatever else. And we've already got that baseline level of interest in
Mhm.
nutrition and fitness. So for me, it was necessary for me to go through that process, that crunchy process that we've already kind of touched on with new clients, where you're a new coach and you're like, this isn't working and I don't know what's going on. And why doesn't this person want to do these things? They said they want this, but
Mhm.
there's deep ambivalence about like wanting this but doing this. Their behaviors are fully out of alignment with what they ultimately want.
Mhm.
And so that's why, I mean, I'm curious, like, what is the missing piece? It's like there's these great educational resources that do teach that, but I think there is a area of opportunity within that realm where, like, if there was, I don't know if it's a more intensive internship style thing where you need to shadow people and so forth, and like get, I mean, maybe the school that you went to and also worked at does more of that, like actually conducting your own client sort of conversations with an expert right here listening to
Mhm.
you and
So
that kind of thing.
there is, like, it depends on the school you go to, and that's why I said this, it's like the Wild West, because all of us are kind of taught this different approach, right? Like, I know, for instance, like IHN and CSNN, like IHN has what's it called, like co-working kind of co-op placements, sort of, right? And then
Mhm.
CSNN does more of the case study aspect, and then I know Pacific Rim and Victoria does um, the more style, like a student clinic, sort of, where they are watched by somebody. But in Pacific Rim, they're also taking things like acupuncture, most likely, and things like that, where they are in a clinical setting and knowing how to have those very clinical approaches. But I also know that the mindset piece is huge with what they teach in that, right? But that's a really
Mhm.
expensive program, like
Mhm.
it's pricey, and I think you pay for it because you're kind of being taught more like a naturopathic doctor at that point, working in a clinical setting. So
Mhm.
when it comes to just to answer that little piece of it, but I think when you're asking like what's missing in terms of figuring out the approach, is I think that well, I see two issues here. So I think that it comes from wherever you're starting in your journey, right? So for example, um, I would say I started my journey like kind of in the paleo world when I was doing kind of CrossFitty stuff when Sean and I first met. And I saw what paleo did for people and for myself, and that fueled my interest in nutrition, but so did my gardening. So I think it depends on where you come from in the nutrition world, because some people are coming in from a yoga background, some people are coming in from a fitness background, some people are coming in because they're coming in for their own health reasons. And I feel like that is what really fuels the style of how the practitioner approaches their business, what their niche is going to be, what their, how they approach it. And I think that's all fine and dandy. We can all come from where we want to come from. But the reality is, like, we're all human at the end of the day. And I just want to collect my thoughts because it's coming. We're all human at the end of the day. And if we're not addressing human nature, we aren't addressing, the issue. And I think that we've gotten too busy in our lives, and we've gotten too we're overcomplicating everything and trying to look for the next distraction, right? Like when I talk about self-care, somebody might really say, I go and I listen to my podcast and I go for a walk. Okay. Is that a distraction from actually being in your body and in your mind? Right? Like
Mhm.
it could make you good, like feel good, and it could make you feel like you're gaining knowledge. And I'm not saying we should ever stop learning, but are you again grabbing knowledge from another person instead of like really looking at what's going on in your mind, what you're saying to yourself, and all of those things? And I think as nutritionists, like we can talk about food all day long and what we put in our body and how it affects us. But I think if we don't look at like why we're putting that food in our body in the first place, um, or what limiting beliefs we have, or getting over the excuses that we have, and really calling bullshit, not only on ourselves, but for our clients too, and making sure that we're clear on our values and the people that we want to work with, right?
Mhm.
If you're working or coming from, oh, that's like my bad. Oh, bad, Lynn. Anyways, did you hear that ding ding?
No.
Good, I'm glad. That's like faux pas number one on the podcast. Make sure you turn all your dingers off.
Yeah.
Do you see where I'm going with this? Is like almost like I'm trying to really make sure that it's clear what I'm trying to say and get across. Is like, I think that we're going to attract the type of clients from where we're coming from. And it's going to progress and change as it goes along, right? Do you see where I'm going with that? Is like, that's
Yeah.
what I think. And I think that
Totally agree.
people are going to feel unfulfilled and confused and lost, like you are perhaps feeling right now. I'm not going to make you like, but I think that, is it not possible that people could feel lost and confused in their journey because they haven't actually figured out what they value and what they want from their life and what they want to see for people moving forward? Like, how do you want to project yourself into the world and make change? And then you're going to start attracting the people who are really meant to be following you, and you'll start seeing those changes. Because when you define like what health truly is, like I could sit here and look at my body and go, oh man, I've got an extra 10 pounds, but I feel fucking good. So can I drop the fact that I'm carrying that extra weight? Or do I need to look at why I'm carrying extra weight? Does the extra weight mean something else? You know, is it coming from another place?
Yeah.
You know?
I like so much of what you said there. The piece that you mentioned about, is that like that makes you feel good. The podcast walk, is that a distraction from actually learning more about yourself, what's going on inside? I mean, that's such a massive piece of, and kind of at a crossroad where I'm at, where funny enough, like it was business coaches that really helped me break through a certain threshold with my coaching, because you hear it all the time, you got to niche down, but they really helped me go through that process even further. Like, who do you help,
Mm-hmm.
and what do you help them resolve? You have to get super specific with that. And that's the beauty of the online approach as well, is that you're not dealing with just people who are going to come to your gym within a certain radius geographically.
Mm-hmm.
You can get very specialized and very specific with who you help, which obviously, again, is like you're saying, where based on your background, where you're coming from, is who you're going to generally draw in. But even that, you can have those initial experiences where you go, like, I mean, in that coaching group, there's guys who are, you know, former bodybuilders or whatever, who just found a niche with like helping corporate women, let's say. And so on a, on that level, they can't like speak to the experience of their clients, because they haven't been a woman, and they haven't been a woman in corporate setting and so forth. But they just found that having coached a variety of human beings, that they tend to resonate with that demographic and had really good success. So you have to go through that like shitty sort of early phase. And what I was sort of alluding to is like questioning and wondering whether in the beginning, there's just, like you said, there's such a variety of ways that you can go about this. So is there a better way for those early people who, like myself, are really probably to a fault, and I realize this now, I was too empathetic and it needed to be more compassionate, or not like focus more on compassion as opposed to empathy, like feeling, it's like that loving kindness in the face of suffering, but not letting it actually affect you,
Yeah,
not
the
taking it
energy.
on yourself.
Yeah.
And which is a huge, huge piece, because this world, in our world, the nutrition and health world, and really, you're right, it's funny what you said earlier, like are you a life coach or a nutrition coach? I mean, that line becomes very blurred when you get into it. So, but you have to, it needs more people who care,
Mm,
but a lot of people who care are kind of, it's tough. So they either get into it and then quit,
mhm.
or there's a big turnover, as you know, in this industry, or they don't get into it at all because they're like, yeah, man, like I kind of recognize that that's heavy, like you're dealing with people's deep issues. So is there like a better bridge? It'll continue to evolve and get better. I think we're on like a really good trend
Mm, mhm.
with it, because we are starting to realize, like, you see this more and more, people aren't just preaching eat these macros and do this workout plan. It's like, no, you have to go into the depths and figure out what is actually causing that. Like, the problem isn't the problem,
Mm,
it's the problem. It's the
that's the
actual
problem.
problem that's
Yeah.
causing the problem, so.
Well, and I think that, like you said, we are on a very good trend. I think people who become nutrition coaches, we become nutrition coaches for a reason. And I think that this is going to go back to like what I said before, is like, we become nutrition coaches for a reason. Maybe we don't recognize what that real reason is behind the reason. It's like the problem behind the problem. The real reason that we became, you know, we became nutrition coaches was because we see ourselves in a specific position, I think, in the world. Like, what's the ultimate reason that you became a nutrition coach? And this is a serious question.
Mm, yeah. I mean, it's a great question. I think I would love to say that it's like this neatly gift wrapped revelation that I had, but it was just this gradual process of recognizing my unique abilities and what I was already interested in. And then again, the empathetic and compassionate standpoint, where just realizing that the path I was on in the corporate realm of sales was not fulfilling.
Mm-hmm.
And I was really fortunate in that it kind of was a gradual thing. Like, I got certified almost for my own benefit, with maybe in the back of my head intention of like, maybe I will take on a few clients,
Mm-hmm.
and started doing that in my old job, and thought, yeah, this is it. Like, this will be what I will eventually transition into full time, because the level of fulfillment and seeing that possibility of actually impacting lives, as opposed to just like selling something.
100%. So most nutritionists are impact driven. Like, would you agree with that? Like, most of
Mm-hmm.
us are trying to make an impact in people's lives. And you said it perfectly, and I was waiting for it. I came from the corporate world. Do you know how many people come from the freaking corporate world into the nutrition world? Okay, why? And I think it's for two reasons. It's like, the people who are in the corporate world, before they become a holistic nutritionist, are A-type personalities who are loving and caring and have like a lot to give. And I think they also see themselves being a leader, somebody who drives impact, right? And they're not fulfilled in that position because either they're not recognized in their corporate world, or they're not progressing because it's so elite. Like, you have to have this, and if you can't advance, like, I think that becomes really wearing on the person themselves in their, like, I'm not going to say spiritual, but in their intuitive being, right? Like, this is hippy dippy. I'm getting crunchy now in a different way. Is like, it's really not fulfilling for a person who is meant to be like an A-type leader, or somebody who is impact driven, to be in the corporate world, because we want to make change in a positive way. And you get to the point, I think, where you realize that when you're selling that really cold corporate kind of package, even when you approach nutrition consulting in that way, it doesn't work. It's not fulfilling. Nothing changes. And so I think when we come into the nutrition world from this like corporate world, and we plunk ourselves into the nutrition world, which really has to be energy work. Like it is energetically, we are helping fuel change. And so we need to be giving people the energy to make that change. And we need to be there and hold them accountable. And that is a lot of effort. That's actually why I stopped consulting years ago, you know, was because I did not have any more energy to give anybody from the corporate world, you know, like from selling cars, like it wasn't fulfilling work. And now that I feel really rooted in what my impact is meant to be, it was really realizing my core values and what I knew I was meant to be doing in the world almost like. And that's why I said, are we life coaches? Do we need a life coach too? Like, do we need a life coach to realize what our potential is in this industry? Because it's so vast and it's so, you can go in any field and somebody might be completely fulfilled by the corporate wellness, or they may be really happy doing bodybuilding or work in a gym. They could be. But I think for a good few of us, we stop consulting because we don't feel like we're energetically fulfilled in the work that we're doing. And so it's really kind of defining what we want as a job, like what's at the root of it. Like, do you want to be coaching people to make life changes? Or do you want to be just, you know, handing them a meal plan?
100%. Yeah. Right? You have to get, it's just like what we said with clients, you have to get that clarity. You have to be clear on what it is you want to do. You're right. That's another beauty of it, is like the modern world, you know, the abundance of options.
Well, so it's noisy, right? Like it's noisy.
Exactly. Yeah. It's
a double-edged sword. It's a distraction.
100%. Absolutely it is. They do research on that. Like, we think more options are, if you ask anybody logically, it's like, would you rather have, you know, 5 options of mustard at the grocery store or 30? They'd be like, well, 30. Like,
then I really get it. Yeah.
Then I'll get there's any option, right? But it paralyzes us. It actually, like, it fucks with our heads and makes every decision more difficult. And I mean, that's another sort of tangent of that realm, where you recognize that in a client, like they're just so consumed by so much of that, that you got a whole other new strategy of like minimizing their decision fatigue throughout the day, especially with regards to food. But I mean, that's the cool piece about it, is that you could literally do that right there. Like, I help this demographic pick the right mustard. Not really, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah,
it's like, you know,
the right teriyaki sauce, you know, like whatever it is.
Yeah, exactly. But you can get really specific and sort of say like, hey, shit, I seem to be really good at helping clients resolve this super specific problem. You know, and then you can get sort of targeted with your content, and maybe it's something you've gone through yourself and you can just be vulnerable about it. And when you really hammer that home, when you nail that and you can speak to it and people read it, and 9 out of 10 are like, this is ridiculous, or they don't even finish reading it. But that one that does is like, whoa, this is me. This is me. I have to reach out to this guy. That was another piece of these business coaches that really helped me, like, alienate. They said that alienate people, like, take stances, figure out who you want to help, and don't give a fuck about the person who will read it and it won't resonate. And even one step further, like, they might even read it and be like, this is stupid. You might even have that, like, mental block where you're thinking about some person, you know, or a specific individual who might be like triggered by this. But if you want to help that one person, you got to go deep. You got to, like, evoke that emotion.
Well, and I think that again comes back to stepping into knowing who you are as a coach too, because you have to be comfortable with those people coming back to you and being like, you're fucking weird. Like your
Yeah,
new
yeah.
thing. And you can look back at them and go, that's okay. It's not for you. You know,
Mhm.
like, no, this
Exactly.
isn't for you. I'm helping somebody else. And I think that's what also like keeps people stuck from starting their business is feeling like they're worried about what everybody else is going to think. You know, like if I put this out there and I am really who I am, people are gonna like not want to be with me or want to coach with me or whatever it is. But it's like the more you are yourself, the more you attract like the people that you
Mhm.
actually want in your life and you want to actually be coaching. And so that's what I think is truly amazing about, you know, like really digging deep into making sure that before you even start your business, you know what you want, because that's going to
Mhm.
help you define um, your niche, like you said, and define what you want out of your business. So like, do you know what your niche is and have these business coaches kind of help you get through that?
Yeah, they have. So, I mean, even within that, as a preface, it's always changing, and I
Mm-hmm.
get more and more specific with how I help. But currently, I'm helping. Even the funny thing is when I did Sean's podcast, I was niching into golfers. I was
Right.
sort of leveraging my social credibility and past history with competitive golf and playing university golf, and thinking I could sort of target that sort of niche market, and I still might tippy toe back into that in a bit of a different way. But since then, my business coaches have kind of helped me like come to the idea of, okay, well, golf, unless you're helping golf professionals, that could be one route. Like that's more of their career. I was targeting like, hey, if you golf, I'll help you. And it's not really specifically targeting a demographic and figure it's not connected with how and what I'm helping them with.
Mm-hmm.
So I've since gone, having been in the realm of sales for about a decade, like I said, in the corporate world. I now help guys who are kind of like anywhere from my age to 50 who are in sales and management,
Mm-hmm.
because I know that struggle, and I know that there's so many common denominators. They're, like you said, they don't have enough time. They're stressed out. So like the benefits that these guys get from something as simple as helping them integrate like digital detoxes on either end of their day, not picking up their phone first thing and putting it away for an hour at the end of the day, and maybe 5 to 10 minutes of meditation, which again, within there, those two things seem simple, but they're really hard to integrate for some, really hard.
Yeah.
If someone's habitually programmed to watch TV until they fall asleep, or pick up their phone and scroll social media first thing in the morning, or if they just have a squirrely brain like we all do to some degree, and they try and meditate and think this is painful.
Yeah.
So, but again, if you can help them, it's the other fascinating thing about coaching. It's like you can know what works, but like, okay, how are you going to teach that?
Yeah.
And how are you going to teach that to different people with
Mm.
different life experience? So,
Yeah. And it's interesting because you get to see, I guess like for me, it's really, it really has been like a journey. Like I said, like there's been a lot of things that have happened, but I feel like everything that I've gone through in my life has kind of prepared me for this moment to help people. And so it's like really owning that story of you and who you are and how to really benefit from it, right? Like, how can you use your sales tactics to convince somebody to put their phone down an hour before bed, right? Because it is
mhm,
it's selling it. Like, how are you going to get them to do it? And so it's, I mean, I still can't get Sean to do it sometimes. I'm like turning the light off at 9:30 and he's sitting there on his phone and I'm like, dude. And then we wake up in the morning and I was like, what time did you go to sleep last night? And he's like, midnight. And then he keeps doing it and doing it and doing it. And then he turns into this cranky monster. And I'm like, I just look at him and I'm like, he's like, I'm tired. Well, who is responsible for that? Like, who is? Like, it's, if you don't want to be tired, put yourself to fucking bed. Like, it's like our childhood dreams and realizing, you know, like, man, I wish I could nap. Okay, well, what's stopping you from napping right now? You know, like, truly and honestly, what are the barriers that we have to work through? So like, what's stopping you from having that healthy breakfast? Well, I don't go to bed on time, and then I wake up late, and then I don't have time. You know, it's really, it does become almost reductionistic again, but looking at the habits versus looking at the nutritional science or the research behind it or anything like that. It's just, where can we cut out those things and put in positive things? And then witnessing almost themselves, seeing how those positive changes actually take a positive effect on their life. You know, like, if you're working with these corporate men and they start putting their phone down, what are some of the benefits that they've gotten from it? And making sure that it's funny, I set intentions, or I set mantras, and one of them is bear witness. Is like, did you sit down on your mat today for that 5-minute meditation? What was your intention for the day? By following that intention for the day, did anything come out of it? And making sure that you witness the positivity that has come out of taking that 5-minute meditation and having that space for yourself, and seeing and like truly bearing witness to what the positive change was. Because when you see those things, you're like, well, fuck, like, why didn't I do this before? It's so easy. And I think maybe that's what's missing. And maybe I've just answered that question finally, is like, what is missing is not only the space of, you know, taking the time to do those things that are positive for us, but like watching it and seeing it and witnessing it.
Absolutely. I love that. And that's, it's essential. And it boils back to that intrinsic, like, within you, figuring out what's going on inside. The one point I wanted to make on that is the funny natural ambivalence that exists within humans too, because sometimes you'll go, okay, you know, let's use the meditation example. Have you ever meditated before? Yeah, I did try it, not super consistently, but I did it a couple of years ago when, you know, my sister started doing it, etc. Okay, cool. What did you notice? How was it? Oh, it was great. It was great. Okay, what was great about it? Well, I just felt more calm, felt more relaxed. And so you start in the beginning, you're like, okay. And so why aren't you still doing it? Like, you're stressed out now, you know? It's this funny thing. So one thing I wanted to ask you, Lynn, because you've been doing this for so much longer, and something that I kind of actively struggle with is like, how do you kind of when do you find it's good to be, because naturally within what we're doing, you have to push people outside the comfort zone, but to a certain degree, you know, if you're just kind of playing that like subtle bad cop, it doesn't work as well. Like, people get resistant and they shut down. So I'm curious when, if anything, you have sort of internal systems or triggers where, you know, like, no, this person needs me to kind of be a bit of like a stern coach and put my foot down and be like, even if it is a bit condescending, maybe, like, you're like, well, okay, well, what do you want here? Right? Instead of maybe just being I find that troubling sometimes, to sort of hit that sweet spot without pushing clients away, while still being like, you know, caring and compassionate, and them knowing that I'm doing it from a loving place.
Okay, my answer to that is going to be, and absolutely, our job as a coach is actually to push people outside of their comfort zone. I really do think that is part, and it's a fine art. It's like sales, right? Like, you learn to read people and you learn to see what they need, right? And what makes a good coach and what makes a good salesperson is somebody being able to read a person, right? Like what's making them fired up, what's causing them to withdraw, what is really like a sticking point. And that's usually where you should really like hone in, is like that sticking point that they are really resistant to. But I think also on that, I'm going to say too, that is like when you're pushing your values on somebody versus helping your client figure out what their values are, you're not going to get that change, and they are going to withdraw from the program, or they're not going to be receptive to what you say and probably not be successful, right? So the reality is that it's super important to help them determine what their values are in working with you, help them set the goals like we talked about earlier, but also like making sure what those changes could potentially bring to them. And your job as the coach is to make them do the things that make them uncomfortable. So for me as like a business coach, you know, maybe somebody won't get on top, like in video. Okay, well, what's the first step that we could do for them is like get them on video in front of a small group, you know, like, or just to send me a video, like have them talk to themselves, hear their voice, send it to me, feel like they're safe, right? Still getting them to kind of hop past that barrier. But, you know, finding the right moment to do it. So I think it's like, yeah, really making sure you're not pushing your values on them and you're listening to what they truly need and helping them figure that out. Because when they come up with the idea, they can then take responsibility for it. Whereas if you come up with the idea, they may not feel that responsibility in it. Does that make sense?
Perfect sense.
Okay.
That's bang on. Absolutely. It's yeah, like so much of this is never this like neat sort of, it's not a neat process. Let's just say that.
And I've been coaching that. Like, that's why I started the Holistic Nutrition Hub in the first place, was because the process was so messy. And I was able to see that very early on, like mostly from a business standpoint. And obviously now my journey is kind of progressing more into making sure the mindset is right. Because how do I coach business and get people fired up about their business if I am not in that position, right? So it really did come down to figuring out like what I wanted out of my business, what I wanted out of my life, what I wanted my day to look like, even like how do I balance that self-care that I want or need with business that actually makes me feel happy at the end of the day, right? And I think I've now kind of merged those two together, is like the business side, which is tricky in and of itself. Like starting a business isn't easy. And then also like, how do you become a good coach and what makes a good coach and what you actually have to do in order to get there. Because nobody talks about it either, because what happens is like the schools and the alumni associations, they pick the nutritionists that have either gotten lucky or have like put in years of work, and now they're advertising it like, look what our graduates did, you know, they're amazing. And all these nutritionists are seeing those people and they come out of school thinking, oh, well, this person did that. But they don't know the reality that business is like, it takes 5 to 10 years to have a business. 90% of businesses are going to fail. You know, that it takes a lot of fucking work and digging through mud and trying to figure out like where your place is supposed to be. And so, yeah, I really do think that it has to do a lot with that. Yeah. Just having,
100%.
it's like Instagram, right? Like we see people in a position that we want to be in, right? But then we don't ever take the steps to get there, and it might be false advertising, right?
Big time. Yep. 100%.
Yeah.
Speaking of Instagram, that's a platform I'd like to no longer be on.
Oh, no longer be on. Ooh, I'm in. Let's talk about this, because that's also a hot topic for this week for me. Tell me more.
No, social media, Lynn, is a funny one for me. Like I kind of went from zero to hero with it because I didn't even have the apps on my phone. I had accounts, but didn't have the apps on my phone before I was doing this, and recognize it just as this. It's awesome. Let's be real. For what we do, it's an amazing resource, and
Yes.
it's been where 99% of my businesses come from. So
Mhm.
I'm forever grateful for it, for giving me the start. I do sort of see these inherent like um, issues with it, not just it, but my relationship with it. So I've had to set really, really like incredibly rigid rules with it. I've
Yeah.
set all kinds of yeah, just parameters to keep me from being on it unnecessarily. But it is something that I'd love to eventually outsource, and kind of am actively looking to do that.
Mhm.
So that's an interesting one. I'd love to get your thoughts on that too. Like, with regards to avenues within what we do outside of social media, there's definitely some outside the box things, if for those who, like myself, who get extreme fulfillment, love the coaching aspect, even love like educating. I like challenging myself to get on video and talk about something, but I like doing that within, a private Facebook group for my clients, for an
Mhm.
example, and not because it's like less daunting than being live in front of my full audience, but because again, I'm open. I find meaning in that discomfort. So, but just from more of a for coaches who aren't necessarily like wanting to be the social media superstars, and there's obviously a spectrum within that. It's not all or nothing, but what avenues are there for kind of not being in that realm, so to speak?
Mhm. I think there's a lot that you can do that's not on social media. And when I said like this week's like a hot topic for Instagram for me, I just find like there is a lot of censorship. And,
Mm,
especially for people who are trying to really have an impact. um, I could give a story, but anyways, I see it happening with somebody who I've been following for a long time, and she's about really just showing you what a woman's body looks like after you've had two kids, right? Like nothing
mhm,
provocative, nothing crazy, but like she has this one picture where she's like bending over and she's got her hands covered, but her tits are like completely not asymmetrical, right? And but she
mhm,
doesn't show anything. And this got censored on Instagram. And really her mission is to show women like, dude, this is what we fucking look like. Don't give like any shits about all these other women who are like putting their booties out and all of these things. And it's
mhm,
incredible because you see other women where it's like they're wearing the most thin shirt you could possibly have, nipples out, and so it's really a platform that you have to know that they are censoring it, and what you are seeing is based on somebody else's opinion of what you should see. And so
mhm,
I did actually a webinar last weekend, and I said the first thing you can never cut out of being a good coach is person to person interaction,
mhm,
because it is so valuable. And to really read a person and feel a person's energy, you have to be, connected to them in some way. And, this works, Zoom works, the way we're doing it works to some extent, but nothing does a better job than sitting down with that like for coffee with somebody, whether that's, I could sit down with a coffee here and we could have a serious conversation like we are. But yeah, person to person contact. So like for
mhm,
you, you could be going into corporate businesses and saying, hey, look, I'm a coach on this is my niche, I think it would be valuable in your business because of this. You could
mhm,
go to a networking event. I bet you would find 90 clients there, because most of them are going to be in your age range. It's going to be busy
mhm,
professional men between the ages of 30 and 50. Um, you could run workshops, you could run, like there's any numerous amount of things that you can do. But I think, for you kind of have an edge because you're a male, and 95% of our people in our nutrition group on Facebook are female. So you do have a huge edge. You are working with a market, like some of us do work with men, but it's usually based on like prostate health or something along those lines, right? Or hormones or whatever it is. Whereas like you are working in a field that is like almost untapped by a male admitting that he's coming from the corporate world, right? So I think there's a lot of room to grow. You could hit the CrossFit gym and do a nutrition talk there, and how many men your age would you find in there?
Lots.
Yeah,
It's true.
yeah.
No, that's the cool piece for sure. There's definitely lots of opportunity out there for sure.
Yeah, I think it's awesome. Like, honestly, it's really nice to talk to you about nutrition and about mindset and have you be open to talking about it, because I don't think a lot of us, female or male, talk about how we feel in the industry, how we feel, with the roadblocks that we come up against too as practitioners. Nobody talks about that stuff. And I think it's like secrecy almost, like, oh no, we're not perfect. We touched on this a bit at the beginning, but like I think it does really boil down to having these open conversations. And so I really have been enjoying this.
Thank you, Lynn. Yeah, you're right. I mean, that's the, likewise, I think that's the magic pill too. It's like for us, I know with my content, initially, I had the biggest surge of clients when I started getting vulnerable.
Yes.
Like deeply vulnerable, like actually where you're about to hit that post button and you're like, eesh, like this is heavy. And there's certain people I might not want to know this or put this out there. So just like you said, it comes full circle with what we started off with, like the colleague hiding A&W in your garbage bin. Like
she's gonna hate that I shared that on here. Like, I really hope she never listens to this, because she's gonna be like, I didn't say any names, so I'm okay. But she knows who she is, and so she'll hate me. But anyways,
you know who you are.
You know who you are. Well, she knows who she is, like, because it's a huge topic of interest between like our closed circle, right? Like, we've talked about that and how like we've actually recognized, I talk about this with my best friend who's an RHN as well, how we've recognized our disordered eating, and how it's actually started by getting too invested in nutrition, like really diving down the rabbit hole and going that way. So yeah, I do think we do have to have these conversations more often with one another.
For sure.
Yeah.
Maybe I was gonna say maybe she'll come on the podcast next and talk about how she overcame that.
I highly doubt it, because I'm not sure she has yet.
Okay.
Not there yet. Yeah.
Different garbage bins.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Awesome. Yeah. Did you have any other things that you wanted to talk about today? I mean, we can stop recording and you can ask me more personal things, but I don't know if there's anything else we could really cover today that, touches on the mindset piece. But if you have a burning question or thing you want to say, even.
I think we covered a lot of ground, and that was an awesome conversation. So thanks for having me on, Lynn. That was phenomenal.
I am super glad to have had you here. I just want to also ask you, for fun, what book are you reading right now? If you are reading a book. Well, you've got it there.
Good question. I do actually. I'm reading Atomic Habits by James Clear, but I just bought this too. It's called the Food and Feelings Workbook. It's by Karen Koenig, but it's a full course on or she calls it a full course meal on emotional health and its relation to eating. It's kind of been this new offshoot where, real quickly, I'll try and make this concise, but like when I think about what the coaching realm is going to possibly morph into.
Mm-hmm.
I think about even just if you as a coach, maybe this is sort of more targeted to the other coaches watching this, but when you think about like job security and how the most important thing you can think of is like, how are you going to be valuable down the road as I think about this a lot, like as AI develops, as these softwares become more advanced, and basically they're already delivering everything a human needs to be healthy, but they're missing that piece that you mentioned, the person-to-person interaction, the health of a coach and client relationship. So my mind goes off kind of looking forward in terms of like, where am I going to get the most fulfillment? Where can I provide the most value based on my like fundamental character traits, and what are the most challenging things? So this book was really kind of like me thinking about, I mean, people who emotionally eat and have disordered eating, they're really challenging clients, and that to me is actually quite inspiring in two ways. A, it's the most fulfilling to help them through their shit because of the biggest challenge. And B, most coaches shy away from that shit because it's very challenging. And so if you can if you're willing to go into that, difficult realm, learn enough and go through enough of that learning process with clients that you can actually help them resolve specific issues, man, your services are going to be forever needed.
I think you honestly hit the nail on the head. I think a good coach, when they are thinking about what they want their business to look like, or they want their lives to look like, they kind of take a mix of their history, right? Like what their skill sets are, what they're good at, what they're interested in, what's fulfilling, morphed with or mixed with what challenges they've come up against, right? Going through their own nutrition journey or whatever. And I think, for me, like, I realized that I was meant to help people heal, however that was meant to be. And so I really look at myself as being more of a healer, and we're not allowed to use that word, but I mean, by healing, I mean in any way imaginable where people are actually at, right? So I feel like my position right now as a business coach, for example, or as like a nutrition business coach, is to help people heal from their own things so that they can learn from their own experience, their own healing journey, to help other people heal. And I think if we kind of make ourselves in a niche where we kind of take that stance that we can help people wherever they are at, you'll always be needed somewhere, I think that's what makes us really special as nutrition coaches, is because most of us do have that empathy and that compassion and want to really have an impact on the world. So it might morph, maybe your niche morphs along the way, but I think as long as you know that you're going to be meeting the person where they are at and addressing their values and their issues, you're always going to be needed in the world. I mean, if you think back to tribal times, they had shamans, they had people help people, like they had healers or leaders help each tribe member figure out who they are and what their place was in the tribe. We're totally missing that now. Nobody teaches us that anymore, right? And I think that's my standpoint on it. And I think that's, like I said, you hit the nail on the head, 100%. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. It's
a bit crunchy, I know.
It's very true.
Say it. You can
No, I
say
like it.
though.
I like it. I want to be a shaman.
Me too. I literally, I love it. That's literally like what my meditation, I'm like, I was a shaman. I know I was. Like, it has to be real. That's awesome. Yeah, like how do you become a shaman? Yeah.
I'm going to Google that once we get off this call then. How to become a shaman.
If you really want to find somebody who's going to like light your fire up, watch Sad Guru if you have not.
Okay.
Um,
Sad Guru.
yeah, he blows my mind on a daily basis. Everything I watch,
Really?
I'm like, oh wow, like that's
No
intense.
shit.
Yeah, you're gonna love him. And he's
I'll
so
check him
relatable
out.
to like people these days. So that's my little tidbit of what I've been digging into. So he'll resonate, I think, for sure.
I like that name. I already like him. Sad
Right?
Guru.
He's like
It's just
buddies with
like,
Will Smith too, which is
oh
just
wow,
even
well,
cooler, you know, like because I love Will Smith.
Fresh Prince. I
Yeah.
mean, come on. You
How
got to be
do
cool if you're hanging with Will.
exactly? He's really cool. Will's cool. Sad Guru's cool. Yeah, but check him out. Anyways, I
He sounds like it could be like a hip hop artist too. Sad Guru.
dude is like okay, well, he literally figured out that he was supposed to be a shaman by like riding his motorcycle looking for a specific mountain that he saw in a vision. And he literally
Jesus.
found it and now has built his ashram on it.
Wow.
Right? From like a really young age too. It's like super crazy. His story is
Damn.
remarkable, but yeah, it's like a guru in modern day time, which is
That's
really,
rad.
yeah, he's really interesting to listen to. So it's funny because Sean will come up and he'll be like, so and so told me about this guy Sad Guru and said that you might be interested in him. I'm like, dude, I've been listening to him for like a year and a half, but it's like he's really starting to make an impact in like the fitness world too, which
Okay.
more with like the PRI folks and the Feldenkrais guys and that sort of, and yoga folks. But yeah, it's pretty interesting.
Wicked. I'll check him out.
Yeah. Anyways, I will stop recording. I just wanted to say thanks again for being here and thanks for the inspirational talk. I literally feel like you encompassed everything that I've been hoping to touch on, and it's nice to hear that you're thinking about these things too, and I'm not alone in in this, you know, train of thought, I guess is the best way of putting it.
You are not. Thanks so much for having me on, Lynn. That was awesome.
Anytime. You're welcome back anytime.